My name is Clara. I am 65 years old, and I need to tell you something I have kept inside for far too long. For 42 years, I lived beside a man who taught me that silence could be a kind of love. His name was Richard. He was tall, steady, and spoke in low tones that made you feel safe. We lived in a Victorian house in Savannah, inherited from his mother's side. The kind of house where sunlight comes through lace curtains like honey, where every room smells of old wood and lavender sachets tucked into drawers. I was a history teacher at a private school. I loved my students. I loved my books. I loved the ritual of afternoon tea on the veranda, watching the Spanish moss sway in the breeze. Richard would come home at 6, kiss my forehead, and ask about my day. He never talked much about his own. I thought that was just who he was. A man who lived in the present, unburdened by yesterday. We had no children. That was a sorrow we buried together, without words. Instead, we built a life of small comforts. Sunday mornings with crossword puzzles, dinner by candlelight, long walks through Forsyth Park, where we would hold hands and say nothing at all. I believed silence was intimacy. I believed routine was devotion. Looking back now, I see how easily I mistook stillness for peace. Richard passed away 3 years ago. A heart attack in his sleep. Swift, merciful. I woke beside him that morning and thought he looked younger somehow, as if death had erased all the weight he carried. The funeral was small. Neighbors came, a few colleagues from his accounting firm. No family, because he said there was none left. I accepted that without question. I accepted so many things without question. After he died, I moved through the house like a ghost. I kept his reading glasses on the nightstand, his coffee mug in the cabinet. I did not touch his study. For 2 years, I preserved everything, as if he might walk back in and ask where I had put his files. But this past October, something shifted. Maybe it was the coolness in the air, or the way the light turned golden and sad. I woke one morning and decided it was time to let go. Not of him, but of the weight. I would clean the attic, donate his clothes, make space for what remained of my own life. The attic stairs creaked as I climbed. Dust danced in the dim light from a single bulb. There were boxes labeled in his neat handwriting. Winter coats, tax records, books. I moved methodically, the way I used to grade essays, one thing at a time. And then I saw it. A leather suitcase, pushed far back beneath the eaves, dark brown, scratched, with brass buckles tarnished by time. On the side, barely visible, were his initials, R.E.D., Richard Edward Davenport. My hands went cold. I knelt beside it, my knees pressing into the dusty floorboards. I tried the latches. Locked, of course. I told myself it was nothing. Old files, business documents, maybe photographs from before we met. But my heart was pounding in a way that told me I was lying to myself. I carried the suitcase downstairs. It was heavier than I expected. I set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling. I called a locksmith. A young man named Daniel arrived an hour later. He was polite, efficient. He examined the lock, hummed softly, and pulled out his tools. It took him less than 5 minutes. The latches clicked open. He lifted the lid just an inch, and then his face changed. The color drained from his cheeks. He took a step back, almost stumbling, and looked at me with something I can only describe as fear. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "close this and walk away." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. His voice was barely a whisper. This doesn't belong to anyone living." My pulse roared in my ears. "What's inside?" He didn't answer. He just backed toward the door, his eyes never leaving the suitcase. "I can't help you with this. I'm sorry." And then he was gone. I stood alone in my kitchen, the autumn light slanting through the window, and I looked down at the open suitcase. Inside, everything I thought I knew began to unravel. I should have listened to him. I should have closed that suitcase, carried it back to the attic, and pretended I had never found it. But I did not, because after 42 years of marriage, after loving a man who taught me that the past did not matter, I needed to know who he really was. I stood there for a long time, my hand hovering over the lid. My breath was shallow. The house was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. The same clock that had measured our life together, second by second, year by year. Finally, I opened it fully. The first thing I saw were photographs. Dozens of them, loose and overlapping, some in black and white, others in faded color. I picked one up with shaking fingers. A young woman, dark-haired, smiling at the camera. She wore a sundress and stood in front of a house I did not recognize. On the back, in Richard's handwriting, it said, "Emma, summer of '73. Emma." I had never heard that name. I set the photo aside and reached for another. The same woman, older now, holding a baby. Her eyes looked tired, but happy. On the back, Emma and Michael, his first birthday. My stomach turned. I looked at more photographs. Emma at a wedding. Emma in a garden. Emma laughing beside a Christmas tree. And Richard. In every single one, Richard was there. Younger, yes, but unmistakably him. His arm around her shoulders, his hand on her waist, his smile broad and unguarded in a way I had never seen. I felt the room tilt. Beneath the photographs was a stack of letters, bound with a faded ribbon. I untied it carefully, my hands numb. The top envelope was addressed to Richard, but not at our address. A different city, a different state. I pulled out the letter inside. The paper was thin, fragile. The ink had bled in places, as if tears had fallen on it. My dearest Richard, I know you said we should not write anymore, but I cannot help myself. Michael asks about you every day. He does not understand why you had to leave. I told him you had important work to do, that you would come back when you could. But he is only 6, and he does not believe me anymore. I miss you. I miss the life we had. I know you made your choice, and I have tried to respect it. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if you think of us, if you remember the way Michael laughs, if you remember me. Please, if you can, send word, even just a few lines. Let me know you are safe. Let me know we were not a mistake. Yours always, Emma. The letter fell from my hands. I stared at it on the table, my vision blurring. My mind tried to make sense of it, but the pieces would not fit. Richard had a life before me. That much was clear, but this was not a life he had left behind. This was a life he had hidden. I reached into the suitcase again. There were more letters, dozens of them. Some from Emma. Some from someone named Michael, written in a child's careful handwriting. Dear Dad, Mom says you are busy. I made you a drawing. It is of our house and the tree we planted. Do you remember? I hope you come home soon. Love, Michael. I covered my mouth with my hand. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and silent. I wanted to stop reading. I wanted to put everything back and pretend I had never opened this door, but I could not. At the bottom of the suitcase, beneath the letters and photographs, was a small wooden box. I lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. I opened the clasp. Inside was a birth certificate. Michael Andrew Davenport, born 1972. Father, Richard Edward Davenport. Mother, Emma Louise Davenport. Davenport. They were married. My hands went cold. I set the certificate down and stared at it, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Richard had been married before. He had a son, a family, and he had never told me. But it was worse than that. I picked up another document, a marriage certificate. Richard Edward Davenport and Emma Louise Harper, married in 1971. And then beneath it, another certificate. This one newer. Richard Edward Davenport and Clara Ann Whitfield, married in 1976. I did the math in my head, slowly, carefully, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. Richard had married me while he was still married to her. I sank into the chair, my legs giving out beneath me. The room spun, my chest tightened. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, suffocating. For 42 years, I had been his wife. I had loved him. I had buried him. I had mourned him, but I had never truly known him. And now, sitting in the kitchen of the house we had shared, surrounded by the life we had built, I realized something that made my blood run cold. If Richard had lied about this, what else had he lied about? I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, the suitcase open before me, and I read every letter. every word, every confession. I needed to understand. I needed to see the shape of the lie that had held my life together. Emma's letters were gentle at first, hopeful. She wrote about small things, Michael's first day of school, a recipe she had tried, the way the garden looked in spring. She always ended with the same words, "I love you. Come home soon." But as the years passed, the tone changed. The hope turned to confusion. The confusion turned to pain. "Richard, it has been 3 years. Michael is asking questions I cannot answer. Where are you? Why do you not write? I do not understand what I did wrong. Please, if you ever loved us, tell me the truth." And later, "I saw you, last month, in the city. You were with a woman. You looked happy. You did not see me. Or maybe you did and turned away. I stood there on the sidewalk and watched you walk past, and I realized I do not know you anymore. Maybe I never did." The final letter was dated 1989, 13 years after Richard and I were married. "Richard, I will not write again. Michael is 17 now. He has stopped asking about you. That is a mercy, I suppose. He has built a life without you, and I'm proud of him for that. As for me, I have finally accepted what I should have known all along. You are not coming back. You never were. I do not hate you. I wish I could, but I do not. I just feel empty where you used to be. I hope wherever you are, whoever you are with, you have found whatever it was you were searching for. I hope it was worth it. Goodbye, Richard. Emma." I set the letter down and pressed my palms against my eyes. My chest ached. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw everything across the room, but I just sat there, silent, the way I had learned to be silent all those years beside him. How could he do this? How could he look at me every morning, kiss me every night, and carry this secret without flinching? And Michael, a son. Somewhere out there, Richard had a son who had waited for a father who never came home. I stood and walked to the window. The street was dark and empty. The houses around me were filled with people sleeping peacefully, unaware that my entire world had just collapsed. I thought about all the years Richard and I had spent together, the quiet dinners, the walks in the park, the way he would hold my hand and say nothing, as if words were unnecessary. I had thought that silence was love, but now I understood. It was not love. It was concealment. He had built a life with me on top of the ruins of another life, and I had never suspected, not once. The next morning, I called my friend Margaret. She was the only person I trusted with something like this. We had taught together for 20 years before I retired. She knew me better than anyone. "Clara?" Her voice was warm, concerned. "Is everything all right?" I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I swallowed hard. "Margaret, I need your help. Can you come over?" "Of course. Give me 20 minutes." When she arrived, I showed her everything. The suitcase, the photographs, the letters, the certificates. I watched her face change as she read, the same way mine must have changed the night before. "Oh, Clara," she whispered. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I am so sorry. I do not understand," I said. My voice sounded hollow. How could he do this? How could he live with me for 42 years and never tell me? Margaret shook her head slowly. Some people are very good at keeping secrets. They build walls so high, even they forget what is on the other side. But why? I looked at her, desperate for an answer. Why marry me if he already had a wife? Why not just leave? I do not know, sweetheart. Maybe he was running from something. Maybe he thought he could start over and erase the past. People do terrible things when they are afraid. I looked down at the photographs spread across the table. Emma's face stared back at me. She was beautiful, kind-looking, real, and I had taken her place without even knowing she existed. I need to find her, I said suddenly. Margaret's eyes widened. Clara, are you sure? That might not be... I have to. My voice was firmer now. She deserves to know he is gone. And I need to know the truth, the whole truth, not just what is in these letters. Margaret hesitated, then nodded. All right, but you should not do this alone. Let me help you. We spent the rest of the day searching. We went through every document in the suitcase, looking for addresses, phone numbers, anything that might lead us to Emma. Most of the addresses were decades old, but finally, tucked inside one of the last letters, we found something. A small slip of paper, a phone number, and beneath it, in faded pencil, Emma's sister, in case of emergency. My heart raced. I picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed. It rang 3 times. Then a woman's voice answered. "Hello?" "Hello," I said, my voice shaking. "My name is Clara Davenport. I am looking for Emma Davenport, or Emma Harper. I believe you may know her." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, carefully, the woman said, "Who did you say you were?" "Clara. I was married to Richard Davenport." Another pause. Longer this time. When the woman spoke again, her voice was cold. "Richard is dead." "Yes," I whispered. "I know. I was with him when he passed." "Then why are you calling?" I closed my eyes. "Because I just found out he had another wife and a son, and I need to know the truth." The silence stretched so long I thought she had hung up. But then she sighed, and her voice softened just a little. "Emma does not talk about Richard anymore. It has been decades. You opening this up again, it will hurt her." "I know," I said, "but I have to. Please." Another pause. Then, "I will ask her, but I cannot promise she will want to see you." "Thank you," I whispered. The line went dead. I set the phone down and looked at Margaret. She squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens next," she said gently, "you are not alone." But as I sat there in the fading afternoon light, surrounded by the evidence of Richard's double life, I realized something that made my chest tighten with fear. I was about to meet the woman whose life I had unknowingly stolen. 3 days passed before the phone rang again. 3 days in which I barely ate, barely slept. I moved through the house like a shadow, touching things that had once felt familiar, but now seemed foreign. The coffee mug Richard used every morning, the chair where he sat to read the newspaper, the bed we had shared for 42 years. Everything felt like evidence, evidence of a life I had believed in, evidence of a man I had never truly known. When the phone finally rang, I jumped. My heart pounded as I picked up the receiver. "Hello? Mrs. Davenport?" It was the same voice from before, Emma's sister. "Yes, this is Clara. My name is Joyce. I spoke with Emma." She paused. "She has agreed to meet you, but only once, and only because I told her it might give her closure." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. Thank you so much. When?" "This Saturday, 2 o'clock. There is a cafe on Whitaker Street, the corner house. Do you know it?" "Yes, I know it. She will be there." "But Mrs. Davenport?" Joyce's voice turned serious. "Please understand. My sister has worked very hard to heal from what Richard did to her. If you are coming to make excuses for him or to defend him, do not come at all." "I am not," I said quietly. "I just need to understand." "Then we will see you Saturday." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my hands trembling. Margaret, who had been sitting with me, looked up from her tea. She said, "Yes?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Then we have 3 days to prepare." Margaret stood and put her arm around my shoulders. "You are going to be all right, Clara. One step at a time." But I was not sure I believed her. Saturday arrived too quickly. I woke early, my stomach in knots. I changed clothes 3 times, unable to decide what to wear. What do you wear when you meet the woman whose husband you unknowingly stole? Finally, I settled on a simple navy dress. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. I wanted to disappear. Margaret offered to drive me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. She hugged me tightly at the door. "Call me when it is over," she said. "No matter what happens." I nodded and walked to my car. The drive to Whitaker Street felt like a dream. The city moved around me, people going about their Saturday routines, oblivious to the earthquake happening inside my chest. I parked near the cafe and sat in the car for 10 minutes, trying to steady my breathing. Finally, I forced myself to get out. The corner house was a small cafe with brick walls and large windows. I could see people inside, laughing over coffee, reading newspapers. Normal life. I stepped through the door, and a bell chimed softly. I scanned the room, and then I saw her. She was sitting alone at a table near the back, by the window. She was older now, of course, but I recognized her immediately from the photographs. Dark hair, now streaked with gray, pulled back in a loose bun. Delicate features, sad eyes that looked up as I approached. Our eyes met, and the world stopped. I walked toward her slowly, my legs unsteady. When I reached the table, I did not know what to say. Every word I had rehearsed in my mind suddenly felt hollow. "Emma?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. She nodded. "Clara." I sat down across from her, my hands folded tightly in my lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sounds of the cafe faded into the background. It was just the two of us, separated by a table and 40 years of lies. Finally, Emma spoke. Her voice was soft, measured. "I did not think I would ever do this. Sit across from you. I did not know you existed," I said quickly, "until 4 days ago. I swear to you I did not know." She studied my face for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I believe you. You do not look like someone who would knowingly do what he did." Tears stung my eyes. "I am so sorry. For everything. For taking—" "You did not take anything." Her voice was firm now, but not unkind. "He left. That was his choice, not yours." I swallowed hard. "When did he leave you?" Emma looked out the window, her expression distant. 1976. Michael was 4 years old. Richard told me he had a business trip. 2 weeks, he said. He kissed us goodbye and drove away, and he never came back. My chest tightened. Never? Not once. She turned back to me, and I saw the pain etched in every line of her face. For the first year, I thought something had happened to him. An accident. Amnesia. I filed a missing persons report. I called hospitals. I drove myself half mad searching for him. And then one day, I saw his name in a newspaper. A business announcement. He had opened an accounting firm in Savannah. "Dear God," I whispered. "I drove there," Emma continued. "I parked outside his office and waited. And when he came out, I saw you beside him. You were laughing at something he said. You looked so happy. And I realized he had not been taken from me. He had simply chosen someone else." A tear slid down my cheek. "Why did he do it? Did he ever tell you?" Emma shook her head. "I confronted him once. Years later. I found his address and wrote him a letter. I begged him to at least acknowledge Michael, to send support, to be a father, even from a distance." She paused. "He never replied. I felt sick. I had no idea. He told me he had no family, that his parents were dead, that he was alone. He told me the same thing when we met," Emma said softly. "Maybe that is who he wanted to be. A man with no past, no obligations, free to reinvent himself whenever the weight of his choices became too heavy. Did Michael ever—" I stopped, unsure how to finish the question. "Did he ever ask about his father?" Emma finished for me. "Every day, for years. And every day, I had to look my son in the eye and tell him I did not know why his father left, that it was not his fault, that he was loved." Her voice cracked. "Do you know how hard that was? To protect a child from the truth that his own father did not want him?" I covered my face with my hands. "I am so sorry." "I know you are," Emma said gently, "but you are not the one who should be apologizing." We sat in silence for a while. I could hear the hum of conversation around us, the clink of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine. Normal sounds, but nothing felt normal anymore. Finally, I looked up at her. Is he all right? Did he grow up okay?" A small, sad smile touched Emma's lips. "He did. Despite everything, he is a good man. A teacher, actually. Married. 2 children of his own." She paused. "He does not know I am here. He does not know about you." "Does he know Richard is dead?" Emma nodded. "I told him 3 years ago. I thought he deserved to know. He did not say much, just nodded and went quiet. I think part of him had already let go a long time ago." I took a shaky breath. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and you do not have to answer if you do not want to." She looked at me, waiting. "Why did you agree to meet me?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Because my sister told me you sounded lost, and I know what that feels like. To have the ground pulled out from under you. To discover that the person you loved was someone else entirely." She reached across the table and gently touched my hand. "You are a victim in this too, Clara, just like I was." Her kindness broke something inside me. I began to cry, softly at first, then harder. Emma did not pull her hand away. She just sat there, holding mine. 2 women bound together by the same betrayal. When I finally composed myself, I looked at her through my tears. What do I do now? How do I live with this? Emma's eyes were kind, but tired. You do what I did. You survive. You let yourself grieve. And then, slowly, you begin to rebuild. Not the life you thought you had, but the life you deserve. I nodded, even though I did not know how. As we stood to leave, Emma said one last thing. There is more to this story, Clara. I can feel it. Richard was not just a man who ran away. He was running from something. And if you truly want the truth, you need to find out what that was. Her words followed me all the way home. And that night, alone in my house, I went back to the suitcase. Because Emma was right. There was something Richard had been hiding, and I was going to find it. I returned to the suitcase that night with a different kind of determination. Before, I had been looking for answers about Emma and Michael. Now I was searching for something deeper. Something that would explain why a man would abandon his family and build an entirely new life on top of lies. I emptied the suitcase completely, laying everything out on the living room floor. Photographs, letters, documents. I sorted them chronologically, trying to build a timeline, trying to see the pattern. Richard had married Emma in 1971. Michael was born in 72. And in 76, Richard disappeared and married me. But there was a gap. A strange, empty space in the timeline where nothing made sense. I picked up the photographs again, examining them more carefully this time. Most were of Emma and Michael. Family moments. Ordinary life. But then I noticed something I had missed before. In several photos from 1974 and 75, there was a man in the background. Not Richard. Someone else. Tall, broad-shouldered, always standing slightly apart from the group. In one photo, he was looking directly at the camera, his expression unreadable. I turned the photo over. On the back, in Emma's handwriting, "Cookout at the house. Richard, Michael, and James." James. I shuffled through more photographs looking for him. He appeared in at least a dozen. Always on the edge, always watching. Why had Emma never mentioned him? I went back to the letters, searching for any reference to this man. And then, near the bottom of the stack, I found something. A letter addressed to Richard, but not from Emma. The handwriting was different, masculine, angular. "Richard, I know what you did. I have known for months. Do you really think you could hide it forever? Do you think people do not notice when money disappears? When documents go missing? You have two choices. You can make this right, or I can make it public. Your family, your reputation, everything you have built will crumble. Think carefully about what matters most to you. You have 1 week." James. My hands went cold. I read the letter again, slowly, trying to understand. Money disappearing. Documents missing. This was not about a failing marriage or a wandering heart. This was about something criminal. Richard had not just left Emma. He had been running from something he had done. I stood and paced the room, my mind racing. What had Richard been involved in? Embezzlement? Fraud? And who was James? A business partner? A friend? I needed answers. But Emma had not mentioned any of this. Maybe she did not know. Or maybe she had been protecting Richard, even after everything he had done to her. I picked up the phone and dialed Joyce's number. She answered on the third ring. "Hello? Joyce, this is Clara. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to speak with Emma again. It is urgent." There was a pause. "Mrs. Davenport, Emma has already told you everything she knows. Reopening this is not—" "Please," I interrupted. "I found something. A letter from someone named James. Does that name mean anything to you?" The silence on the other end was so long I thought she had hung up. Then, finally, Joyce spoke. Her voice was tight. "Where did you find that name?" "In Richard's suitcase. There was a letter. It talked about money going missing, about Richard having 1 week to make something right. Do you know what that means?" Joyce exhaled slowly. "I need to talk to Emma. Do not do anything until I call you back." "Joyce, please, do not do anything," she repeated firmly. "I will call you tomorrow." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my pulse racing. Joyce knew something, and whatever it was serious enough that she did not want to talk about it over the phone. I barely slept that night. My mind churned through possibilities, each one darker than the last. By the time morning came, I was exhausted and on edge. The phone rang at 9 o'clock. I grabbed it on the first ring. Hello? Clara. It was Emma. Her voice was strained. Joyce told me what you found. Emma, I am sorry. I did not mean to. You need to stop digging. Her words were sharp, urgent. You need to put everything back in that suitcase and forget you ever found it. I cannot do that. I need to know what Richard did, what he was running from. No, you do not. Emma's voice cracked. Trust me, Clara. Some truths are not worth knowing. Please, I said. Just tell me who James was. Emma was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. James was Richard's business partner. They ran a small investment firm together. And in 1975, James discovered that Richard had been stealing from their clients. Thousands of dollars, maybe more. My stomach dropped. Oh my God! James gave Richard a chance to return the money quietly, to fix it before anyone found out. But Richard panicked. He took what was left in the accounts and ran. He left me, he left Michael, and he disappeared. By the time James realized what had happened, Richard was already gone. What happened to James? Emma's voice turned cold. James spent the next 2 years trying to make things right. He sold everything he owned to pay back the clients. He ruined himself trying to fix what Richard had broken. And then, one night, he drove his car off a bridge. I felt the air leave my lungs. He took his own life? The police called it an accident, Emma said quietly. But I knew better. James was a proud man. He could not live with the shame of what Richard had done. The guilt consumed him. I sank into a chair, my legs weak. Did anyone ever find Richard? Did the police? They looked for him, Emma said. But Richard was careful. He changed cities, changed his name on paper, though he kept using Richard Davenport socially. He built a new identity. He became someone else. She paused. He became the man you knew. Tears streamed down my face. Emma, I had no idea. I swear I would never have. I know, she said softly. That is why I am telling you this. Not because I want to hurt you, but because you need to understand who Richard really was. He was not just a man who made mistakes. He was a man who destroyed lives and never looked back. Why did you not tell me this when we met? Because I was trying to protect you, Emma said. I thought if you did not know, you could keep your memories of him intact. You could grieve him as the husband you loved. But now that you have found that letter, I cannot let you keep searching without knowing the truth. I wiped my eyes, my hands shaking. Is there anything else? Anything I should know? Emma hesitated. Then she said, There is one more thing. After Richard disappeared, James's widow came to see me. She was destroyed. She told me that if she ever found Richard, she would make sure he paid for what he had done. She was not talking about money, Clara. She was talking about justice. What was her name? Catherine. Catherine Brennan. I wrote the name down on a scrap of paper. Is she still alive? I do not know. That was 40 years ago. But if she is, and if she ever found out where Richard went, what he built with you. Emma trailed off. You need to be careful, Clara. Some people do not forgive. Some people wait. We said goodbye, and I hung up the phone with trembling hands. I looked down at the name I had written, Catherine Brennan, and then I did something I knew I should not do. I searched for her. It took me 3 hours, but I found a listing. Catherine Brennan, age 78, living in a care facility just outside Charleston, less than 2 hours away. I stared at the address for a long time. Every part of me said to leave it alone, to let the past stay buried. But I could not, because if Catherine had spent 40 years waiting for justice, she deserved to know that Richard was gone. And maybe, just maybe, she had answers I still needed. The next morning, I got in my car and drove to Charleston. I did not tell Margaret where I was going. I did not tell anyone, because some doors once opened cannot be closed again, and I had just opened the darkest one of all. The care facility sat on the outskirts of Charleston, a pale yellow building surrounded by oak trees, draped in Spanish moss. It looked peaceful, serene, the kind of place where people came to fade quietly into their final years. I sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to gather the courage to go inside. What was I doing? What did I hope to gain by reopening wounds that were 4 decades old? But I could not turn back now. I needed to know. I needed to understand the full scope of what Richard had done. And if Catherine Brennan had spent her life carrying the weight of his betrayal, she deserved to know that he was gone. I walked through the front doors. The lobby smelled of lavender and floor polish. A young woman sat behind the reception desk, smiling as I approached. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I am here to see Catherine Brennan." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. "Are you family?" "No, but it is important. I have information about someone from her past, someone she knew a long time ago." She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Let me check if she is available. She does not get many visitors." She picked up the phone and spoke quietly. After a moment, she hung up. "Room 117, down the hall, second door on the left. But please, she is quite frail. Do not upset her." "I will be gentle," I promised. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the polished floor. When I reached room 117, I paused outside the door. My heart was pounding. I took a deep breath and knocked softly. "Come in," a thin voice called. I opened the door. The room was small but tidy. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm light on a narrow bed and a wooden chair. Sitting in the chair, wrapped in a pale blue shawl, was a woman so tiny she seemed almost weightless. Her hair was white and thin, her face lined with age, but her eyes were sharp, alert. And when they landed on me, they narrowed with curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was stronger than I expected. "My name is Clara Davenport." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "I am sorry to come unannounced, but I needed to speak with you about someone you knew, a long time ago." Catherine's expression did not change. "I am an old woman. I have known many people." His name was Richard Davenport. The air in the room went cold. Catherine's hands, resting on the arms of her chair, tightened into fists. Her jaw clenched. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she spoke. "Why are you here?" "Because Richard was my husband, and he passed away 3 years ago." Catherine stared at me, her eyes blazing with something I could not quite name. Anger, grief, maybe both. "Your husband," she repeated, her voice low and bitter. "How convenient for him, to die before facing what he did." I stepped closer, my voice gentle. "I only just found out what he did. To your husband, to Emma, to everyone. I did not know until a few days ago. I swear to you, I did not know." Catherine studied my face for a long time. Then finally she nodded. "Sit down." I sat on the edge of the bed, facing her. She looked out the window, her expression distant, as if she were seeing something far away. "James was a good man," she said quietly. "Kind, honest. He believed in people. And Richard Davenport destroyed him. Emma told me what happened, about the money, about how James tried to make it right. He gave everything," Catherine said, her voice trembling. "Everything we had, our savings, our house. He sold it all to pay back the people Richard had stolen from. And it still was not enough. The shame of it broke him. He could not sleep. He could not eat. He would sit at the kitchen table for hours, staring at nothing, saying he had failed." Tears welled in my eyes. "I am so sorry." "Sorry does not bring him back," Catherine snapped. Then she closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. "I am sorry. It has been 40 years, and I still cannot speak about it without anger." "You have every right to be angry." She opened her eyes and looked at me. "After James died, I spent years trying to find Richard. I hired investigators. I searched records. I even went to the police, but they said there was not enough evidence to pursue him. He had covered his tracks too well." She paused. "I wanted him to pay, not just with money. I wanted him to feel what James felt, the shame, the guilt, the weight of knowing he had destroyed innocent people." "Did you ever find him?" Catherine shook her head. "No. He vanished. It was as if he had never existed, and eventually, I had to let it go. I had to survive. I had 2 children to raise on my own. I could not spend the rest of my life chasing a ghost." "He lived in Savannah," I said quietly. "He married me. He became an accountant again, under his real name. He built a life, a respectable life." Catherine's face twisted with fury. "Respectable? He was a coward, a thief. He let James die rather than face the consequences of what he had done." "I know." My voice broke. "And I am so, so sorry. I wish I could undo it. I wish I could bring your husband back, but I cannot. All I can do is tell you that Richard is gone, and that you were right about him. He was not a good man." Catherine was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Did he ever talk about James? Did he ever express any regret?" I thought back over all the years Richard and I had spent together. The quiet dinners, the long walks, the moments where he seemed distant, lost in thought. I had always assumed he was thinking about work, or the future, or nothing at all. But now I wondered, had he been thinking about them? About the people he had destroyed? "No," I said finally. "He never mentioned James, or Emma, or any of it. He told me he had no past." Catherine laughed bitterly. "Of course he did. That is what cowards do. They rewrite history so they can live with themselves." "There is something else," I said hesitantly. "I found a letter in his things, from James. It was written just before Richard disappeared. It gave him 1 week to make things right." Catherine's eyes widened. "I never knew about that letter. James never told me. Maybe he was trying to protect you, or maybe he thought Richard would actually do the right thing." "He was a fool," Catherine whispered. "My beautiful, trusting fool." We sat in silence for a while. The sunlight shifted across the room, painting the walls in shades of gold. Outside, I could hear the faint sound of birds singing. Finally, Catherine spoke again. "Why did you come here, Clara? What did you hope to find?" "I do not know," I admitted. "Maybe I needed to see the damage he caused. Maybe I needed to know that I was not the only one he lied to." I paused. "Or maybe I just needed to tell you that he is gone, that you do not have to wonder anymore, that he never faced justice, but he is no longer out there living the life he stole." Catherine nodded slowly. "Thank you for that. It is not much, but it is something." I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check. I had written it that morning for every penny I had in my savings account. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was all I had. "This is for you," I said, handing it to her. "I know it does not erase anything, but Richard took so much from you, and I benefited from that theft even though I did not know it. Please, take it." Catherine looked at the envelope, but did not open it. "I do not want his money." "It is not his money," I said firmly. "It is mine. Money I earned teaching, money I saved. It has nothing to do with Richard. Please, let me do this." She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, she took the envelope. "You did not have to do this." "Yes, I did." Catherine tucked the envelope into her shawl and looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You are a better person than he ever was." "I do not know about that," I said quietly, "but I am trying." As I stood to leave, Catherine reached out and touched my hand. "Clara?" "Yes?" "Be careful. Richard may be gone, but his secrets might not be. If there is more you do not know, it will find you. It always does." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean that men like Richard do not just steal money and disappear. They leave trails, debts, people who remember, and sometimes those people come looking." I thought about the suitcase, the letters, the photographs, everything hidden in that attic for decades. What else was Richard hiding? I thanked Catherine and left the care facility with more questions than answers. As I drove back to Savannah, her words echoed in my mind. "His secrets might not be gone. They will find you." And that night, when I returned home, I discovered she was right, because there was a man standing on my porch, waiting for me. The sun had set by the time I pulled into my driveway. The streetlights cast long shadows across the lawn, and the house looked dark and unwelcoming. I was exhausted. The drive from Charleston had drained me, and my conversation with Catherine had left me hollowed out, as if someone had scooped away everything I thought I knew and left only emptiness behind. I gathered my purse and stepped out of the car. That was when I saw him. A man stood on my porch, his back to me, looking at the front door. He was tall, wearing a dark coat despite the mild evening. Something about the way he stood, so still and patient, made my stomach tighten with unease. I froze beside my car, one hand on the door. He must have heard me because he turned. Even in the dim light, I could see his face. He was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and sharp features. His eyes found mine, and he did not smile. "Mrs. Davenport?" My throat went dry. "Who are you?" He took a step forward, and I instinctively stepped back. He stopped, raising one hand in a gesture of peace. "I am sorry. I did not mean to startle you. My name is Michael. Michael Davenport." The world tilted. Michael, Richard's son. I stared at him, unable to speak. This was the little boy from the photographs, the child who had written letters to a father who never came home. And now he was standing on my porch, a grown man, looking at me with eyes that were achingly familiar. Richard's eyes. "How did you find me?" My voice came out as a whisper. "My mother told me," he said quietly. "She called me 2 days ago. She said you had been asking questions, that you had found out about us." He paused. "I needed to see you, to see the woman who lived the life I thought my father would come back to give us." His words cut through me like glass. "Michael, I did not know. I swear to you, I had no idea you existed. If I had known—" "I believe you," he said, his voice softer now. "My mother told me you were kind, that you were hurting too." He looked down at his hands. "I did not come here to blame you. I came because I need to know something, and I think you are the only person who can tell me." I swallowed hard. "What do you need to know? Did he ever talk about me? Even once?" The question hung in the air between us. I wanted to lie. I wanted to give this man the answer he deserved, the answer that might heal some small part of the wound his father had left. But I could not. "No," I said, my voice breaking. "He never mentioned you. He told me he had no family, no children. I am so sorry." Michael closed his eyes and nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting that answer all along. When he opened them again, they were wet with unshed tears. "I spent my whole childhood believing he would come back," he said. "Every birthday, every Christmas. I would watch the door, thinking maybe this time, maybe today." He wiped his eyes roughly. "And then I grew up and realized he was never coming, that he had chosen not to, that I was not worth staying for." "That is not true," I said urgently, stepping closer. "Michael, whatever your father did, it had nothing to do with you. He was broken. He was a coward. But you were innocent." "Was I?" Michael looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Because I have spent my entire life wondering what I did wrong, what was so terrible about me that my own father could not stand to be near me." "Nothing," I said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. Your father was running from his own sins, not from you." Michael shook his head. "I know that now. I am a father myself. I have 2 daughters, and I cannot imagine anything that would make me leave them." His voice hardened. "Which is why I need to understand. Why would a man abandon his child? What kind of person does that?" "A selfish one," I said. "A man who cared more about escaping his mistakes than about the people he hurt." Michael studied my face for a long moment. Then he said, "There is something else, something my mother would not tell me. She said if I wanted to know, I had to ask you." My pulse quickened. "What is it? Why did he leave?" "She said it was not just about running away from us. She said there was something he did, something criminal, but she would not give me details." I hesitated. Did he deserve to know? Did anyone deserve to carry the weight of their father's crimes? But looking at Michael's face, at the decades of unanswered questions written in every line, I knew I could not keep the truth from him. "Your father was in business with a man named James Brennan," I said carefully. "They ran an investment firm together. And in 1975, your father stole money from their clients. Thousands of dollars. When James discovered it, he gave your father a chance to make it right. But instead of returning the money, your father took what was left and disappeared." Michael's face went pale. "He stole from people?" "Yes, and James spent the next 2 years trying to pay everyone back. He lost everything. His house, his savings, his reputation." I paused, my voice dropping. "And then he drove his car off a bridge. The police called it an accident, but his wife believes he took his own life because he could not live with the shame of what your father had done." Michael staggered backward, gripping the porch railing for support. "Oh God, I am sorry," I whispered. "I know this is not what you wanted to hear." "My father did not just leave us," Michael said, his voice hollow. "He left a body count behind him." We stood in silence. The night air was cool now, and I could hear the distant sound of traffic from the main road. Normal life, continuing on, indifferent to the wreckage we were standing in. Finally, Michael looked at me. "Did you love him?" The question caught me off guard. Yes, I did. Or at least, I loved the man I thought he was. What was he like, with you? I thought about it. Quiet, gentle. He was not expressive, but he was steady. He came home every night. He never raised his voice. We had routines, rituals. It felt like peace. I paused. But now I understand it was not peace. It was control. He kept everything small and predictable, so he would never have to face anything real. Michael nodded. My mother said the same thing, that he could not handle emotion, that whenever things got difficult, he would shut down. Did she tell you anything else about him? About his life before you were born? No. She said she did not know much. They met when she was young. He told her he came from a small town, that his parents were gone, that he wanted to start fresh. She believed him. Michael looked at me. Did he ever talk about his childhood? Where he came from? Never. Not once. If I asked, he would change the subject. So we know nothing, Michael said quietly, about who he really was, where he came from, why he became the kind of man who could do what he did. No, I admitted. We do not. Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've been carrying his name my whole life, Michael Davenport, and now I find out that name is attached to theft, betrayal, a man's death. He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. How do I live with that? The same way I'm learning to, I said gently, by remembering that his choices are not yours, that you are not him, that you have built a life of your own, with your own values, your own integrity. His sins do not define you. Michael nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. I want to believe that. Then believe it, I said, because it is true. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, Thank you for telling me the truth. I know it could not have been easy. It was not, but you deserve to know. Michael glanced at the house behind me. Did you find anything else? In his things? I thought about the suitcase, the letters, the photographs. Some, but I have not gone through everything yet. If you find anything else, Michael said carefully, anything that might explain why he did what he did, will you tell me? Yes, I promise. He nodded and turned to leave, but then he stopped and looked back at me. Mrs. Davenport, please, call me Clara. Clara. He paused. I am sorry for what he put you through. You did not deserve to be lied to for 42 years. Neither did you, I said, or your mother. Michael gave me a sad smile. Then he walked down the steps and disappeared into the darkness. I stood on the porch for a long time after he left, my heart heavy. Meeting Michael had made Richard's betrayal real in a way it had not been before. This was not just about stolen money or abandoned wives. This was about a child who had spent his entire life wondering why he was not enough. I went inside and locked the door behind me. The house felt emptier than ever. I walked to the living room, where the suitcase still sat on the floor, surrounded by papers and photographs. Catherine's words came back to me. If there is more you do not know, it will find you. I knelt beside the suitcase and began searching again. This time, I was not looking for letters or photographs. I was looking for something deeper, something that would explain who Richard had been before he became the man I knew. And then, at the very bottom of the suitcase, hidden beneath a false lining, I found it, a small leather notebook, old, worn, filled with handwriting I did not recognize. I opened it to the first page, and what I read there made my blood run cold, because this was not Richard's handwriting. This was someone else's, someone who had been watching him. I carried the notebook to the kitchen table and sat beneath the overhead light, my hands trembling as I opened it again. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting was small and precise, written in blue ink that had faded to gray in places. The first entry was dated March 1973. Subject continues to display patterns of avoidance. Wife reports increasing emotional distance. Financial discrepancies noted in client accounts. Monitoring will continue. I stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. Subject, monitoring. This was not a diary. This was a surveillance log. Someone had been watching Richard. I turned the page, my heart pounding. April 1973. Met with subject's business partner, James Brennan. He expressed concern about missing funds, but has not yet confronted subject directly. Advised him to document everything. Subject appears unaware of investigation. My breath caught. James had known someone was watching Richard. Someone had been helping him build a case. But who? I flipped through more pages. The entries continued, methodical and detached, tracking Richard's movements, his meetings, his lies. And then, halfway through the notebook, the tone changed. September 1975. Subject has become aware of investigation. He confronted James Brennan yesterday. Argument was heated. James gave subject 1 week to return stolen funds. I do not believe subject will comply. He is preparing to run. I turned the page with shaking hands. September 26, 1975. Subject withdrew remaining funds from joint account, approximately $47,000. Wife is unaware. Subject purchased train ticket to Savannah under his own name. Foolish, arrogant. He believes he is untouchable. October 1st, 1975. Subject has disappeared. James Brennan is devastated. He is taking full responsibility for the missing funds, selling personal assets to make restitution. I have advised him to file criminal charges, but he refuses. He says he does not want to destroy subject's family, noble, but misguided. I had to stop reading. Tears were streaming down my face. James had known where Richard went. He could have turned him in, could have saved himself, but he chose to protect Emma and Michael instead, and it had destroyed him. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. November 1977. James Brennan is dead, ruled accidental, but those who knew him understand the truth. Subject's actions have claimed another victim. I have tried to locate subject in Savannah, but he has established new identity. Married a schoolteacher, operating accounting firm under original name. Brazen. My stomach turned. Whoever wrote this had found Richard, had known about me, had watched us build our life together, but they had done nothing. Why? I turned to the final entries. December 1977. Contacted subject by telephone. Informed him I know where he is, know what he has done. He begged me not to expose him. Offered money. I refused. Told him he will spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering when justice will find him. That is punishment enough. For now, I will continue to monitor. If he hurts anyone else, I will act. But for now, I will let him live with his conscience, if he has one. The entries stopped there. Nothing more. Just blank pages. I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. Someone had known everything, had followed Richard for years, had the power to destroy him, but had chosen not to. Who was this person? And why had they let Richard go? I looked at the inside cover of the notebook, hoping for a name. Nothing. Just a symbol, a small stamp in the corner, 3 letters, PID Private Investigator. Someone had hired a detective to follow Richard. But who? James, Emma, or someone else entirely? I needed answers. I picked up the phone and dialed Emma's number. It rang 4 times before she answered. Hello? Emma, it is Clara. I am sorry to call so late, but I found something. A notebook. Someone was investigating Richard, watching him. Do you know anything about this? There was a long pause. What kind of notebook? A surveillance log. It tracked Richard's movements from 1973 through 77. It mentions James. It mentions me. Someone knew everything, Emma. And they did nothing. Emma's breath hitched. Oh, God. I thought he destroyed it. Who? Emma. Who are you talking about? My father, she whispered. My father hired the investigator. I felt the air leave my lungs. Your father. After Richard left, I was a mess. I could not eat, could not sleep. My father saw what it was doing to me, and he hired someone to find Richard, to bring him back, or at least to make him face what he had done. Her voice cracked. But when the investigator found him, when he learned what Richard had stolen, my father made a choice. He decided that exposing Richard would destroy Michael, that it would make everything public, that Michael would grow up knowing his father was not just absent, but a criminal. So he let Richard go? Yes. He told the investigator to stop, to close the case. He said Richard's punishment would be living with what he had done, that the truth would catch up to him eventually. Emma paused. But my father kept the notebook as insurance in case Richard ever came back, in case he ever tried to hurt us again. Where is your father now? He passed away in 1998. Heart failure. Emma's voice was thick with tears. I thought all of his files were destroyed. I had no idea he had hidden the notebook in Richard's things. He must have put it there, I said slowly, as a warning or as evidence, in case anyone ever needed it. Clara, you need to destroy that notebook. Burn it. If anyone else finds it, if Michael finds it. Michael already knows, I said gently. He came here tonight. I told him about James, about the money. He deserves to know the truth. Emma was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, How did he take it? He was devastated, but he is strong, stronger than Richard ever was. Yes, Emma whispered. He is. I looked down at the notebook. Emma, there is something I do not understand. The investigator said he contacted Richard, warned him, but Richard never mentioned it to me, never seemed afraid. How did he just go on living as if nothing had happened? Emma sighed. Because that is what Richard did. He compartmentalized. He put the past in a box and closed the lid, and he was very, very good at pretending. I thought about all the years Richard and I had spent together, the quiet dinners, the Sunday mornings, the way he would kiss my forehead and say everything was fine. Had he been pretending the entire time? Or had he convinced himself that the man he was with me was real and the man he had been before was someone else entirely? Clara? Emma's voice pulled me back. Yes? What are you going to do with the notebook? I looked at it, sitting on the table in the lamplight, evidence of 40 years of lies, proof that Richard had never truly escaped his past. I am going to keep it, I said, not to hurt anyone, but because it is the truth, and the truth deserves to be remembered, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. We said goodbye, and I hung up the phone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the notebook. Then I carefully placed it back in the suitcase with everything else. The letters, the photographs, the marriage certificates, all the pieces of Richard's fractured life. I thought about Michael, driving home to his family, carrying the weight of his father's sins. I thought about Emma, who had spent decades rebuilding her life from the ashes Richard had left behind. I thought about Catherine, alone in her care facility, still grieving the husband Richard's actions had destroyed. And I thought about myself, a woman who had loved a ghost, who had built a life on a foundation of lies. But as I sat there in the quiet house, something shifted inside me. The grief was still there, the anger, the betrayal, but beneath it, something else was growing. Clarity. For the first time in 42 years, I could see Richard clearly, not as the man I wanted him to be, but as the man he truly was, flawed, broken, selfish, a man who chose escape over responsibility, silence over truth. And I realized something. I was not like him. I would not run. I would not hide. I would face the truth, no matter how much it hurt, because that was what it meant to be free. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was dark and quiet. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the lawn. Tomorrow I would call Michael. I would tell him about the notebook, about his grandfather's investigation, about how, in the end, people had tried to protect him, even when it cost them everything. Tomorrow I would begin to rebuild, but tonight I would sit with the truth and let it set me free. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the living room with a cup of tea that went cold in my hands, watching the moonlight move across the walls. The suitcase sat on the floor beside me, closed now, but its contents weighed on my mind like stones. By the time dawn broke, I had made a decision. I could not carry this alone anymore. The secrets, the lies, the carefully constructed facade that Richard had built around our life. If I was going to move forward, I needed to let the truth out into the light. Not to punish Richard, though perhaps he deserved it, but to release myself from the burden of pretending. At 8 o'clock I called Margaret. Clara, is everything all right? Her voice was thick with sleep. I need you to come over. There is something I have to show you. Something important. Give me 30 minutes. True to her word, Margaret arrived half an hour later with coffee and pastries. She took one look at my face and set everything down on the kitchen table. You look terrible, she said gently. What happened? I told her everything. About Catherine. about Michael showing up on my porch, about the notebook and the investigator and Emma's father. I showed her the surveillance log, watching her face change as she read the careful, damning entries. When I finished, Margaret sat back in her chair, her hands pressed to her mouth. My God, Clara. I do not even know what to say. I know. I took a sip of the coffee she had brought. It was bitter, but it helped ground me. But there is more. I have been thinking about something all night. What is it? The notebook ends in 1977. The investigator said he would keep monitoring Richard, but there are no more entries. Nothing for the next 45 years until Richard died. I looked at Margaret. What happened? Did the investigator just give up, or did something stop him? Margaret frowned. You think something happened to him? I do not know. But if Emma's father hired him, there must be records, files, something that would tell us who this person was and why they stopped watching Richard. Clara, are you sure you want to keep digging? You have already uncovered so much. Maybe it is time to let the past rest. I cannot, I said firmly. Because what if there is more? What if Richard did something else, something worse, and I never knew? I have spent my entire adult life beside a stranger. I owe it to myself to know who he really was. Margaret reached across the table and took my hand. Then I will help you, whatever you need. We spent the morning making calls. First, I tried to find information about Emma's father, but Emma had been vague about the details. She remembered that the investigator was someone her father knew personally, someone he trusted, but she had never met him, had never been told his name. My father kept it all very quiet, she said when I called her. He did not want me to know he was tracking Richard. He thought it would hurt me more if I knew where Richard had gone and what he was doing. Do you have any of your father's papers? Old files? Anything that might have a name or a contact? Emma hesitated. I have some boxes in my attic, things I saved after he died. I have not looked at them in years, but I can check. Please, anything you can find. That afternoon, Emma called me back. I found something. A receipt. For investigative services. It is dated 1975. The company was called Piedmont Investigations. And there is a name. Robert Caldwell. I wrote it down quickly. Thank you, Emma. This might be what I need. I hung up and turned to Margaret, who had been sitting beside me the whole time. Piedmont Investigations. Robert Caldwell. Can you help me find out if they are still in business? Margaret pulled out her laptop and started searching. It took less than 10 minutes. Clara, she said slowly. Piedmont Investigations closed in 1992, but Robert Caldwell is still alive. He is 84 years old and living in Columbia, South Carolina. My heart leapt. Can you find a phone number? Margaret typed for another moment, then nodded. Got it. I stared at the number on the screen, my pulse racing. This was it. The man who had watched Richard, who had documented his crimes, who had chosen to let him go. I needed to know why. With trembling hands, I dialed the number. It rang 3 times, then a gravelly voice answered. Hello? Mr. Caldwell? Robert Caldwell? Yes, who is this? My name is Clara Davenport. I am calling about a case you worked on a long time ago. A man named Richard Davenport. There was a long pause. Then carefully he said, I remember that name. I was his wife. He passed away 3 years ago. And I recently found a notebook, a surveillance log. I believe you wrote it. Another pause. Yes, I did. Mr. Caldwell, I need to understand. You knew everything. You knew what Richard had done. You knew where he was. Why did you let him go? He sighed deeply. Because Emma's father asked me to. He did not want the boy to grow up with that shame. And at the time, I thought he was right. I thought Richard's punishment would be living with his guilt. But it was not enough, I said. James Brennan died because of what Richard did, and Richard never faced any consequences. I know. His voice was heavy with regret. I thought about that case for years, wondered if I made the right choice. But by the time I realized I should have done more, too much time had passed. The trail was cold, and Emma's father was dying. He made me promise not to reopen it, said it would destroy his daughter to see it all dragged up again. Mr. Caldwell, is there anything else? Anything you did not put in the notebook? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, There is one thing. Something I found near the end of my investigation, but never told anyone. I was not sure if it mattered. What was it? Richard's name, he said. Richard Edward Davenport. That was not the name he was born with. My blood went cold. What do you mean? I found a birth certificate in Ohio. A boy born in 1946. His name was Edward Collins. Same birth date as Richard, same parents, but no record of a Richard Davenport before 1968. He changed his name? Yes, legally, when he was 22 years old. I could not find out why, but whatever he was running from, it started long before he met Emma. I gripped the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Do you still have that birth certificate? No. I turned over all my files when I closed the agency, but it should be in public records. Cuyahoga County, Ohio, Edward Collins, born August 12, 1946. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for telling me. Mrs. Davenport? His voice softened. I am sorry for what he did to you. You did not deserve that. No, I said quietly. None of us did. I hung up and turned to Margaret. Her face was pale. He changed his name, she said. Clara, who was he before he became Richard? I do not know, but I'm going to find out. That evening, I sat at my computer and searched public records for Edward Collins, born in Ohio in 1946. It took hours, dozens of dead ends. But finally, just after midnight, I found it. A birth certificate. Edward James Collins. Parents, Harold and Evelyn Collins. And beneath it, a newspaper article from 1967. Local family mourns loss in tragic accident. My hands shook as I read. Harold Collins, 49, and Evelyn Collins, 46, were killed yesterday when their home caught fire. Their son, Edward Collins, 21, was not home at the time of the incident. Authorities are investigating the cause of the blaze but suspect faulty wiring. The Collins family was well known in the community. Services will be held Saturday. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Richard's parents had died in a fire, and less than a year later, he had changed his name and disappeared. Why? I kept searching, and then I found another article, this one from 6 months after the fire. Arson investigation reopened in Collins. Fire authorities have reopened the investigation into the deaths of Harold and Evelyn Collins after new evidence suggested the fire may have been deliberately set. A source close to the investigation stated that accelerant was found in multiple locations throughout the home. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. And then, nothing. No follow-up articles, no arrests, no resolution, just silence. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Richard's parents had died in a fire that may have been arson. And shortly after, Richard changed his name and vanished. What had he done? What had he been running from his entire life? Margaret stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. When she finished, she put her hand on my shoulder. Clara, she whispered, you need to stop. Whatever this is, it is too dangerous. I cannot stop, I said. Not now. Yes, you can. Richard is dead. Whatever he did, it is over. Let it stay buried. I looked up at her, tears streaming down my face. But what if it is not over? What if there are more people out there like Emma and Catherine? People he hurt? People who never got answers? Margaret knelt beside me and took my hands. Then let the authorities handle it. This is not your burden to carry. But it was, because I had been his wife. I had loved him. I had believed in him. And now I owed it to everyone he had destroyed to find the truth. The next morning, I booked a flight to Cleveland. Margaret tried to talk me out of it, but I had made up my mind. I needed to see the place where Richard was born, where his parents died, where he stopped being Edward Collins and became the man I thought I knew. The flight was short, but it felt like crossing into another world. When I landed, I rented a car and drove to the address listed on the fire report. It was a quiet neighborhood, lined with modest houses and old trees, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other, where people stayed for generations. The house where Richard grew up was gone. In its place stood a newer home, pale yellow with white shutters. I parked across the street and sat there for a long time, staring at the spot where Richard's childhood had ended in flames. Finally, I got out and knocked on the door of the house next door. An elderly woman answered, her face lined with age, but her eyes sharp and curious. "Can I help you?" "I hope so. My name is Clara. I'm researching a family that used to live next door, the Collins family. They died in a fire back in 1967. The woman's expression changed. Recognition, and something else. Sadness, maybe, or fear. "I remember that fire," she said quietly. "I was just a girl, but I remember. Everyone talked about it for years." "Do you remember their son, Edward?" She nodded slowly. "Eddie? Yes, quiet boy. Kept to himself mostly. Always seemed troubled, even before the fire." "Troubled how?" The woman glanced behind her, as if making sure no one was listening. Then she stepped out onto the porch and lowered her voice. "His father was a hard man. Strict. There were rumors that he was cruel to Eddie. Nothing anyone could prove, but people talked. And Eddie's mother, Evelyn, she was fragile, nervous. Some people said Harold broke her spirit." My chest tightened. "What happened after the fire?" "Eddie disappeared, just vanished. The police questioned him, of course, but he had an alibi. He was at a bar that night, miles away. Witnesses confirmed it, so they let him go." She paused. "But people always wondered, because 3 days before the fire, Eddie and his father had a terrible fight. My husband heard it through the walls, shouting, things breaking. Eddie screaming that he wished his father was dead. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Did anyone ever prove Eddie was involved? No. The investigation went nowhere. Not enough evidence. Eventually, people stopped talking about it. Eddie never came back for the funeral, never claimed the inheritance. It was like he wanted nothing to do with any of it." She looked at me. "Why are you asking about this now?" "Because Eddie became someone else," I said quietly. "He changed his name, built a new life, and I just found out about all of this." The woman studied my face. "You knew him, did you not? After he left?" "Yes, I was married to him. For 42 years. Her eyes widened. "And you never knew?" "Not until a week ago." She shook her head slowly. "Then I am sorry for you, dear. Whatever he became, whatever life he built, it was all constructed on a lie. And lies like that, they have a way of poisoning everything they touch." I thanked her and returned to my car. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I drove to the county records office and spent the next 3 hours searching through old files, fire reports, police statements, witness testimonies. The picture that emerged was devastating. Richard's father, Harold, had been an accountant, rigid, controlling, known for his temper. Richard's mother, Evelyn, had been hospitalized twice for what the records called nervous exhaustion. And Richard, Edward at the time, had been arrested once at age 19 for assault after attacking his father during an argument. The charges had been dropped. Evelyn had refused to press them, but the pattern was clear. Richard had grown up in a house filled with violence and fear, and when his parents died, he had been the prime suspect, but he had an alibi. Multiple witnesses placed him at a bar 30 miles away when the fire started. The investigation concluded that the fire was either accidental or set by an unknown intruder. Richard was cleared, and then he disappeared. I sat in the records office, surrounded by dusty files, and I tried to reconcile the boy in these documents with the man I had married, the man who had kissed my forehead every morning, who had held my hand on Sunday walks, who had built a life of routine and predictability. Had he been guilty? Had he somehow arranged his parents' deaths and gotten away with it? Or had he simply been a traumatized young man who saw an opportunity to escape and took it? I did not know, and the truth was, I might never know. But sitting there, I realized something. It did not matter, because guilty or innocent, Richard had made a choice. He had chosen to run, to erase his past, to build a new identity on top of the ruins of his old one. And in doing so, he had hurt everyone who ever loved him. Emma, Michael, James, Catherine, me. We were all victims of the same man, a man who believed he could outrun his demons by pretending they did not exist. I gathered the files and made copies of everything. Then I drove back to the airport. On the plane home, I closed my eyes and thought about the suitcase, about all the secrets it contained, the letters, the photographs, the notebook, and now, this. The story of a boy named Edward, who became a man named Richard, who destroyed lives and then built new ones, who never faced justice because he was too good at hiding, but he was not hiding anymore. When I got home, it was late. The house was dark and quiet. I set my bag down and walked to the living room. The suitcase was still there, exactly where I had left it. I knelt beside it and opened it one last time. I looked at everything inside, the evidence of 45 years of lies, and I made my decision. The next morning, I called Michael. "Clara," he sounded surprised. "Is everything all right? I need to see you. Can you come to Savannah? There is something you need to know. Something about your father's past, his real past." There was a pause. "How bad is it?" "Bad," I said honestly. "But you deserve to know the truth. I will be there tomorrow." I called Emma next, then Catherine's daughter, who agreed to bring her mother if she was strong enough to travel, and finally Margaret, who said she would be there no matter what. 2 days later, they all sat in my living room, Michael and Emma side by side for the first time in decades, Catherine in a wheelchair, frail but determined, Margaret beside me, holding my hand. I told them everything, about the fire, about Harold and Evelyn, about the investigation and Richard's disappearance, about the boy named Edward who had become the man who hurt them all. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Michael spoke. His voice was thick with emotion. "So we will never know if he did it, if he killed his own parents." "No," I said gently, "we will not." Emma wiped her eyes. "But we know who he was. A man who ran from pain instead of facing it. A man who destroyed others to save himself." Catherine nodded slowly. "My James tried to save him, gave him a chance to make things right, and Richard repaid him with betrayal." She looked at me. "But you, Clara, you gave us something James never got. You gave us the truth." "It is all I have to give," I said. Michael stood and walked to the window. He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned back to us. "I have spent my whole life hating my father for leaving, for not being there. But now I understand. He was not capable of being there. He was too broken, too afraid." He paused. "I do not forgive him, but I can let him go." Emma nodded. "So can I." Catherine reached out and took my hand. Her grip was weak, but steady. "Thank you, Clara, for finishing what my James started, for making sure the truth did not die with Richard." That evening, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the living room with the suitcase one last time. I thought about burning it, about erasing all evidence of Richard's past, but I could not, because the truth mattered, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. So I closed the suitcase and carried it back to the attic. I placed it exactly where I had found it, beneath the eaves, in the shadows. And then I walked downstairs and stood in the doorway of the bedroom Richard and I had shared for 42 years. The room looked the same, the bed, the dresser, the reading glasses on the nightstand. But it felt different now, emptier, as if Richard's ghost had finally left. I walked to the closet and began removing his clothes, slowly, methodically. I folded each piece and placed it in boxes for donation. I cleared his side of the dresser, his books, his papers, everything that had belonged to the man I thought I knew. By dawn, the room was empty of him, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. I stood at the window and watched the sun rise over Savannah. The Spanish moss swayed in the breeze. The city was waking up, beginning another day. Life continuing on, indifferent to the secrets that had been uncovered, the lies that had been exposed. My name is Clara. I am 65 years old, and I have spent the last week learning that the man I loved for 42 years was a stranger. But I am not broken. I am not lost, because I did something Richard never could. I faced the truth. I looked into the darkness and did not turn away. And now, standing in the soft morning light, I am ready to begin again, not as Richard's widow, not as the woman who did not know, but as myself, Clara, a woman who survived the greatest lie of her life and came through it stronger. If my story helps even one person see the truth they have been avoiding, if it gives courage to someone living beside a stranger, then perhaps all this pain was worth something. Perhaps in the end, the truth is the only thing that ever sets us free.